What's up? My name is Nick. I'm the owner at Evexia Health and Performance. Welcome in. Today I'm going to walk you through what it's like to get started with us. Follow me. Okay, cool. The first thing we're going to do is walk you through your onboarding assessment. This is going to give us an idea of where your movement, your strength, your conditioning is at. But before we get into that, we're going to walk through why we use heart rate zone training. And the biggest reason is because it allows us to be more efficient. When you are working at lower intensity zones, your body is going to be more efficient at burning fat or using oxygen, but also at higher intensity zones, you're going to be burning more calories and you're going to be training your body's capacity to be able to work really hard. So in order for us to measure what intensity you're working at, we're going to use a Morpheus strap or a different type of strap here. But what's cool is once we set this up and I've got it connected, I'm going to press start on the heart rate system and bam, you are up on the screen. What's cool about this is there are 3 different zones that we will coach when you're working with us. Number 1, the big blue one here. So that goes up quite a bit. For me, that's up to about 156 beats when I get into my conditioning zone, which you can see here, and that's the green one. We'll spend a good amount of our working effort and conditioning sessions in the green. Sometimes in the strength training sessions, we will get into the green as well, but then use the heart rate to be able to recover down back into the blue. A lot of times when people get to working out and they try to push their conditioning, they go all out. That would be red zone efforts. For me, that would be above 175 beats per minute. And that's something that you can certainly do, but is not meant to be the bulk of your workout or your training. So we're going to teach you how to use these zones efficiently. The next piece of this is going to be getting into a metabolic warm-up. And essentially that is us taking our heart rate and slowly building it up over the course of the next 6 to 12 minutes. The goal with this is to find a cardio machine that you feel comfortable with. A lot of people feel good starting with an incline walk, so we'll keep that pretty simple and start there. Anywhere from about 2.2 to, 3.2 miles per hour, whatever pace feels good depending on your height. And then we usually start most people at 3 to 5% if they're on here as well. The goal is to start at something easy, like a 4 out of 10 with total effort. If 10 was the hardest thing you ever did and 1 was the easiest thing. With that in mind, over the course of every 2 minutes, I want to take and bump things up. So I'm going to work my way from a 4 to a 5 to a 6 to a 7 to maybe an 8 out of a 10 in total effort or rate of perceived exertion. And essentially what that's doing is taking me through those different zones we talked about, right? So I've got the blue zone, I've got the low part of that, the high part of that, the green, and then the red. My goal is over that 6 to 12 minutes to bump this up every 2 minutes and then end up in a position over the course of that time frame, like I said, 10 minutes total, or 6 to 12 minutes total, and end at the bottom of the red or at the top of the green. Once we get that going, then you take a little bit of a breather and we'll get into your mobility work. Up next, we're going to go through a assessment to get a better idea of whether or not you have a mobility focus or you need a stability focus. And what I mean by that is some people are just super stiff. Their bodies don't move very well, their hips are really tight. Or maybe you get someone who's done a lot of yoga and they're hypermobile. That person's going to need something a little bit different. So getting an idea of general mobility and stability needs, but also collectively how you move through your spine is the next part of what we'll walk through. The most important thing that you do when you exercise is something that you do naturally, but you probably don't even think about, and that's breathing. So we're going to walk through breathing and bracing strategies, and then we'll get into some of the next pieces. The first thing that you can do is focus on just laying on your back. You're going to take your thumbs and put them on the bottom of your rib cage, your pinkies, and put that on the front of your hips. You'll wrap your fingers across your abdomen and start focusing on taking a big breath into the palm of your hands. So I'm going to breathe in the nose, expand through my midsection, out of the mouth like I'm blowing air through a straw, and feel my rib cage press and my abdomen wrap from the back towards the front. You're not literally breathing into your belly, but you're focusing on being able to expand the rib cage, use the diaphragm, and work through all the natural stability pieces that go with this. We have all types of different core stability muscles, and a lot of them are activated through your breathing patterns. So if you're not breathing appropriately, that's going to be a big limiting factor. But now that we've got that piece of it down, we can focus more on different levels of stability and then start to branch out and see how well your body is able to move. We're going to look at your core stability through 2 different angles. Number 1, straight on, and then number 2, on a side bridge position. The first one's going to be using a prop, just a nice big stability ball here for us to be able to add a little bit of extra pressure resistance. I'm going to lay down into a dead bug position, and before you think, oh my goodness, it's just a dead bug, wait until we add the stability ball because it definitely adds a different component. I'm gonna get my feet up into a tabletop position. I want a little bit of a space in my lower back. I don't wanna be pressing down too much, but that certainly can give you that feel for how to be able to activate your abs. So if you imagine my tailbone is pressed in the ground now, I can lift up and you can see me shaking a little bit. That's because I'm closing the gap between my core here. That's a simple activation and awareness drill. But even when I'm not pressing smash into the ground with my lower back here, I should still feel some engagement through my midsection. That's the place we want to be, and when we are there, I can put my hands nice and long and my knees here. As I apply pressure into the ball with both sides, it definitely creates more tension through my core. So this is a great opportunity for us to assess, one, can you create that pressure? But two, can you stabilize and move through a long range of motion with coordination without losing this? Some of the biggest mistakes we see here are people having a hard time being able to stay control with their midsection or coordinating going same side at once instead of cross-body coordination, which is something that we should all be able to navigate in a position like this. After we get rid of this thing, we're gonna move into the next piece where we're coming to a side bridge position. This is assessing if I'm able to get my hips fully extended, but also if I can stabilize through the lateral part of my body. So I'm gonna start with my knees slightly bent. I'm gonna keep my elbow under my shoulder, press up, and create a side plank from here. Also, if I wanna add another level of hip stability, I can take and open my hips up so I'm in more of a side bridge position, and then take this arm and raise it nice and long. You can make this more dynamic, or you can hold it static, but the goal here is to see how strong you are through that lateral portion of your body. Up next, we're gonna look at your body's ability to extend at the hips from a supine position or laying on your back, but also how well you segment your spine. A very simple exercise. The glute bridge here can help us do that, but we're gonna add a little bit more of a rolling effect to it. I'm gonna take my arms, press them long, and roll my shoulder blades back so I'm stable in my upper back. I'm gonna drive through the middle of my feet, and I'm gonna extend my hips. My body should be in a straight line here, but what I'm going to do different than a traditional glute bridge where I just drop straight down is I'm going to roll from the top of my back to the middle of my back, to the lower back, and to the tailbone. And then I'm gonna press my way back up and roll my way back down. What I'm doing is identifying whether or not I can segment my spine or if I move in chunks where things just come straight down. We were meant to be able to flex our spine, so whether it's that way or if it's getting into something like this where we're doing more of a segmented cat-cow, where we're working slowly through each section, we should be able to move our spine in different ways. So that's one of the next pieces to identify how well we move at the spine. Now we need to get in to see how the hips and the shoulders are rotating. Both your hips and shoulders are ball and socket joints. So imagine here's the socket, here's the head of the femur or the head of the humerus. Those things are meant to rotate. And without the stability portion that we just did, you may be getting rotation or compensation in other areas. So now that we have kind of an idea of what should be stable and what should feel strong and sturdy, we can work into the things that should be moving a little bit more. Number one, we're gonna do a 90-90 hip assessment. This is gonna give us a chance to look at the ability for your hips to internally rotate on the back leg and externally rotate on the front leg. This is more of a passive stretching position, so I can stretch more on the front, I can stretch more on the back. When you go to pivot here, sorry about the midsection there, you would get into a spot where you are able to see how smooth people can transition from internal to external rotation. Also, if you can hold yourself up tall like this, then you have the ability to stabilize in those internal and external rotated positions. Once you have the ability to access this is more of a passive assessment. You would move into something like a hip car, where you're going to be able to work through a more active range of motion of driving that hip in a circle. Same thing for the shoulder. I can take a more active range of motion approach to assess the range of motion of a ball and socket joint in the shoulder. Both those things are known as CARs or controlled articular rotations. Great tools for us being able to look at how well things move independently, joint by joint. We are almost to the fun and sexy stuff, but there's one last thing that was really important for us to check out, and that is how well you rotate through your thoracic spine. So one of our favorite exercises for judging this would be laying on your side here. You give yourself a pillow or a mat or a foam roller, but I'm gonna stack this up to where I either have my legs slightly in front of me or I stagger them like so, trying to anchor my lower body down so I don't get any movement at the hips. From here, I'm gonna take and roll my back down and open up. and see how far over I'm able to get and open up. As you get further and further into this, you should feel like something opens up more as you're warming up, but what we don't want is for that to come up off the ground and end up in a position where I'm cheating that rotation that should happen up top, down low. So the goal is, can I get to a point where I'm at least at around way past 90 degrees? Would this be like 135 degrees here? Ideally closer to 180. But that is going to be one assessment that'll let us know whether or not you're getting enough movement through your thoracic spine. Because once again, if I lack the stability, which we went over a few exercises ago, or the mobility to move through a full range of motion, all of these other exercises, the squat, the hinge, the push, the pull, the primary things that you see people training in the gym are going to be limited if we don't address the foundation first. But now that we got that all done, let's get into all the fun stuff. The first functional movement pattern we will go through is a squat using a TRX. And I know that some people are like, I don't need a TRX, but it's a great tool to be able to teach you the foundational movement skills necessary to squat well, and then carry that over into progression. So I'll walk you through the 3 primary progressions that we'll do to get somebody under a barbell. Number 1, let's see if you can squat when you have the ability to create some tension in your upper back, and then also sit into a good range of motion where you are opening your hips and letting your butt fall to your heels as your knees track forward. You hear a lot of people talk about how your knees shouldn't go over your toes, and notice as I do that, my heels come up here. One of the biggest limiting factors for most people in their squat is their ankle mobility, and if it's not that, it's usually their hip mobility. So what's nice about a TRX is it lets me set back, it takes that out of the equation, and gives me a chance to assess how well I can set into a squat without my ankles being a problem. It also just gives us a general idea of how the movement should feel. When you're doing this right, it should feel pretty effortless, and you shouldn't have a lot of tension through this. It's just giving you a chance to create some stability up top, not rounding, but staying big with your chest. Once you've graduated that, we'll look at being able to use a kettlebell or a dumbbell for a goblet squat. So with this, I'm front loading the weight. I'm gonna put it up close to my chest. I'm gonna keep my body stacked so that my ears are over my shoulders, my hips, my knees, my ankles. And I'm gonna do the same exact movement pattern, opening my hips, sitting into a squat, driving back up to the top. One of the things that you catch here is usually an ankle mobility issue. So, real quick, now I've got some slants. I'm gonna use these to help with my ankles. When you put your heels up, that takes the ankle out of it a little bit more so I can actually sit into that without limiting at this point here. So if you are someone who's got stiff ankles, good range of motion squats can be achieved by just putting something up underneath your heels. Once we have checked those 2 things off the box, then we can start playing around with getting more of a heavy load on, and that's where a barbell would come into place. With a barbell, you've got several different squat options. The one that's probably the safest and the easiest for most is the back squat. So if you want to come a little bit tighter, I'll show you how that works. On the back squat, I'm going to take my hands just outside my shoulders, find an even place on the bar for both hands, pull myself up underneath that barbell, settle in that meaty part of my traps, and then find a place where I'm naturally rocking back and forth. Before I start, I'll take a big breath down into my midsection, lock everything in up top, say hook or hook, and that will help you brace. And you can sit down as you hold, and then exhale as you drive back up to the top. We won't get into too much of the details or technique on squats today, but that will be the progression. So you're gonna go TRX or some type of body weight, get into a goblet squat, and then a barbell. Up next, we're gonna do a row pattern or a pulling pattern. This is a TRX, once again, very simple, but it teaches us how to stabilize down low and start to row and use our scaps or shoulder blades up top. First part of this movement is my body's in a straight line. I keep my chest tall and act like somebody's pulling me nice and vertical from the top of my head. I'm gonna exhale and pull my shoulders back to start. So notice I roll my shoulders back, pinch them together like I'm trying to squeeze a pencil between my shoulder blades, and coming back out without ever losing that tension through here. I'm gonna exhale as I pull in and squeeze, inhale as I come back out, and never let any slack in the TRX. Once we've mastered that, we can work to other pulling variations. The next progression will be moving to something single arm for a row. So we're gonna use a 1-arm dumbbell row. We're gonna set up shop to where I've got 3 strong pillars, which is every limb that is not the one I'm rowing with. I'm gonna let that arm hang nice and long. And like I did on the TRX, I'm gonna start to stabilize my midsection, so get long through my torso. And then from here, I'm going to take the shoulder blade, drive it back, and pull this to the front of my hip. Inhale, coming down. Exhale, pulling up. Thinking about keeping that elbow in tight. I don't want to get in here. I want to keep my shoulder out of my ear and then pull that elbow nice and far back like I'm trying to wrap it towards my tailbone. We'll work through that and then show you one more variation, which would be an overhead pull. And typically for any overhead pulling movement, the standard when your palms are forward are just outside shoulder width, kind of like they were with the barbell squat. I'm going to look up, find an even point on the bar so I can make sure that I'm not tilting side to side. I'm going to slide up underneath the bench here, get my legs nice and anchored in. I'm going to grow tall just like I always focus on that, press my ribs down, and then start the same way with my shoulder blades. So I roll them back, lean back into it, and finish with that pull right across here. The goal is that I'm trying to break the bar in half as I go through this, not just pull it down and let my shoulders come forward. I want a big chest. Inhale as I come up, lean back, drive the shoulders, exhale and break the bar when I come down. The hinge pattern is probably one of the hardest ones for people to learn, which is why we like to start with a PVC to make the pattern feel natural and then get into the weight after. This PVC pipe is going to go across my back. I'm going to put my palm on it on the top and the bottom, making sure I have 3 points to touch. Number 1, I'm going to touch my lower back with the back of my fist. I want it to touch between my shoulder blades and the back of my head. From here, I'm going to take my feet and put them about shoulder width apart. I'm going to take a nice bend in the hips, and then I'm going to hinge at the waist. So I'm literally taking this and twisting it or tilting it forward like you're rotating or turning a key in a doorknob. I'm going to turn that, push my hips back, keep some cushion in my knees, and I should feel this all the way through my posterior chain, my glutes, my hamstrings. And if you feel like you're going to fall backward, you're probably doing it somewhat right. Now the thing is, if I really am doing a great hinge, I make sure that I find that balance. My chest comes forward, but I never round it. So notice I'm not getting away from the PVC pipe here. I'm staying intact. I'm long through my spine and I'm moving through my hips. So think a screwdriver to turn it one way or a key, turning it back to the other, and then getting tall at the top. Once I have that figured out, I can ditch this and we can get into loading it with a kettlebell. So process is exactly the same. I'm going to stand over the top of it, just outside or just about hip width apart. I'm going to take in that same position, get nice and long, hinge right through here, and then grab a hold by bending my knees down to get in that position. Or if you want to, you can bend straight over. But before you get started, you have to find that same position. So I'm going to take and set everything in. Notice if you put that line right through my back, you can see everything there. Big breath in my midsection. Hold. Exhale to come back up. That hook noise is something that fighter pilots actually use when they're going through G-forces to help them brace. So it's a really good tip. Shout out to Dr. John McNeely for that one. To be able to brace and breathe here, right? So before I go, I sit down and I hinge. I set in place and I don't just pull and yank. You got to make sure the slack is out. So I'm finding tension. Big breath in. Exhale, come up. Inhale, come back to the top. Notice I set it down the same way I pick it back up, and that is a kettlebell deadlift. Up next, the safest way to load a heavy hinge pattern is a trap bar deadlift. At least in our opinion, we certainly don't limit our clients to those, but when we're really progressing into heavier weights, this is the best way to do it. Reason being is when we step inside of this, the weight is distributed side to side instead of front to back. So overall, a little bit less risk of lower back pain, which is pretty common when you're working with people who maybe are more sedentary throughout the course of their day. Regardless, when we get to this, I'm going to keep my feet about hip width apart like I did before. I'm going to take my hands and find a center point on the bar. So notice how that bar is here. I want to make sure I find that center grip in that position. Before I start, I do the same things I talked about before. Obviously, we'll use clamps when we load it up. Take a big breath in. Set. Come to the top. Inhale. Hinge back. Exhale, come to the top. And that's how we work through a trap bar deadlift. Now we're going to look at 2 different pressing variations, very similar to the pulling. A lot of this has to do with what's going on at the scapula or the shoulder blade here, whether or not you have a whole lot of movement or stability through there. Before we overhead press, always going to get an idea of where that passive range of motion is or active range of motion is overhead before we start to load it. So someone lays on a bench and they're going to press at a really high incline like this, we would look to see where their shoulder sits before you start to see any type of cheating at the rib cage or any arching at the back. So in the position I'm in now, I get up to this spot. I don't have any pinching or issues in between my neck and my trap, and I'm able to keep my ribs in a relatively flat position. So pressing through here should be no problem, as long as I can open the chest up as I come down and then come back to the top. Obviously, as you work more and more into an overhead position, there's more likelihood that this starts to flare open and you start to cheat through extending the spine. So that's something we'll look at before we get someone pressing overhead. Generally speaking, a really simple pressing movement would be either an incline press or a dumbbell bench press. So with that, first things first, we'll do a dumbbell bench. I'm gonna grab a hold of a pair of dumbbells I know someone can do, lay them on their back here, and then start by taking and creating a base of strength through my hips and my glutes. So I'm pressing my feet in the ground, rolling my shoulders back, so I'm pressing my upper back or mid back into the bench. And without flaring my ribs, I want to think about keeping that stability or length through my midsection, opening up, stretching the chest, driving right back up to the top. Really important here that I'm at a 45-degree angle, so notice that I'm not like this. If you look at my shoulders in comparison to my ears, the difference between this and this is crowding my neck and my traps. Most people want to bench really high. We would encourage you to think about screwing into a 45-degree position, driving the elbows at 45, keeping the wrists stacked over the elbows, exhaling up, inhaling down as you work through a chest press, and staying strong through your midsection. Up next from here, let's take a look at how you should overhead press the barbell. The barbell bench press is pretty straightforward, very similar to the dumbbell bench that we just did. One of the biggest things that you think about in a barbell bench is that if you're looking at me while I'm laying sideways, imagine that I start with the bar and I'm underneath it at about the eye height. And then when I come down, I take and tuck into a little bit of a loop. So if you draw a line here, this is actually gonna come up and swoop back down to that position. Same type of thing happens when you go to press overhead, but just in a different plane or angle. So I'm going to grab a hold of this bar once again, same as the wide setup that I did with a lat pull down. I'm gonna step underneath it and create a rack across the front of my shoulders and chest. Notice I'm not bearing all that pressure on my wrists here. I'm keeping my chest big so that my shoulders and my chest can take a pressure point across the barbell to help still hold that weight so all is not sitting on my wrists. I'm gonna take a big breath in my midsection, just like you do with the other ones, like we talked about. Small bend the knees, move my head out of the way, press and lock everything vertical. So I'm in this position. Once again, we want to check for mobility. We don't want to be all arched. We're in a crazy spot here. Don't want it out in front of me. I want to finish with my head through the window, but also avoid going through the position where I punch through like this. Everything should be straight up and down and stacked. So big breath in, lock at the top, come back down, and when I'm done, I will run it to the back of the rack. The last movement pattern we're gonna go through is a split squat or a lunge. And I know it may seem super remedial to have a PVC pipe for this, but it is a great tool to focus on range of motion before we start getting into loading that lunge pattern. So I'm gonna put that PVC pipe out in front, across from the front leg. So left leg forward, PVC pipe in my right. Notice how I'm up on the ball of my foot or up on my toes. I wanna make sure that I'm not flat out like this. I really wanna get tall through that back leg. I want to keep my hips underneath my chest here, so I don't want to get in this position where I'm heavily loaded forward. And yes, you'll feel a stretch through here if you're very tight or if you sit a lot. That is the whole point of the PVC pipe. If you need to, you can always grab a second one to give you a little bit more support. But I don't think about dropping straight down like an elevator here. I don't want to escalate my way forward like I'm on an escalator. I want to drop straight down. So I'm going to sink down into here and really load that hip. So if you guys want to see what I mean by that, I'm sitting into the hip on the front leg. So as I sit, I'm lowering down, and I should feel this through this glute. My knee is stacked over my ankle so that I've got a nice pillar of support, and I feel a good stretch through that back hip flexor. Notice as I come back up to the top, the next step would be hands on the hips, and then being able to do a stationary split squat. And then from there, I could take and do reverse lunges, trying to keep my foot stable on the front leg and then come back. Another thing to look for here is width. especially women. You're taught to be very petite and legs together. But we want to think like you've got a 2x4 running through your legs, and you want to keep width here so you're staying about hip width apart. I'll step back, avoiding that from crashing in, keeping everything stable, sitting and driving through this hip as I come to the top. Once you get this down, then we can load it. So that means dumbbells, kettlebells, sandbags, whatever makes sense for you. But that is the final of the movement patterns. Let's walk through the conditioning assessment next. One of the best pieces of equipment you could possibly use for conditioning is something like an assault bike. It is 100% a love-hate relationship, but it is a great tool. What we'll walk through here is essentially getting an idea of what type of performance can I put together over a certain stretch of time. So either how much distance I can cover in a certain period of time, how many calories I can run or burn on the bike according to the way it measures calories in a certain time, some form of designated assessment over the course of 3 to 6 minutes so we can get an idea of your capacity and output over that time frame, really measure your endurance, but also be able to have a performance baseline for us moving forward. Another thing we can watch here is peak power, so we can see how much power can you put out over a short period of time or over a sustained period of time. There are a lot of different ways we can measure this, so a lot of times the bike test is going to be more specific to the individual and the goals that they have. But one thing that we can also showcase is how to use the heart rate zones. So I'll go through and show you kind of what this would look like, but essentially we'll get a chance to see how high can you push yourself. Imagine we do something like a 2-mile bike test, which is one we've done recently with our community, with our coaches, and it's a fantastic way to get an idea of where people's endurance is at. If somebody's doing something around 5 minutes or less, they're in pretty dang good shape. If you're above that 6-minute mark, you probably got some work to do. But it also tells us, does that allow you to get to the peak output of your heart rate? Does that get us into that red zone that we talked about earlier? And then not only that, but when I reach my peak, how long does it take me to come down and recover? So we'll also do not only how far can you go or how much can you produce, but what is your max heart rate in this assessment? And then what does that recovery look like over 60 seconds? So an example would be, bam, 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 I go through it. I've got a chance to get my heart rate up to 190, and in 60 seconds, I recover 20 beats. That would be pretty good. Ideally, you're looking for 20 to 30 beats over a 60-second recovery for someone to have good recovery. But let's check it out and see if I can get my heart rate up into the green and what that looks like to recover. All right, so I just finished a 2-mile bike and didn't give it everything, but definitely got my heart rate up to the top of that green zone. Notice I can only talk in a few words at a time when I'm at that level of intensity because your body's sucking air. That's what it should feel like up at the top of green. The goal here would be quiet. And then I can see where my heart rate comes down. But notice it's even still elevating because my body's catching up to the response. So I'm gonna stop, I'm gonna breathe, and as you can see, we'll watch it come down. Big inhales in the nose. So now I'm back in the blue and I can talk without catching my breath every 2 words. That's what it would look like in a conditioning assessment. Honestly, a lot of these things that we talked about today, foundation of movement. You gotta move well, you gotta have good quality. We gotta see what kind of shape your conditioning is in. We'll wrap it up and we'll let you guys get after it. Now that we're finished with your conditioning assessment, we are almost completely done with your full assessment process. The last thing we want to do is leave ourselves time to walk through any specific corrective needs or homework needs. One of the things that might come up is tight hips or stiffness through your upper back or your neck or maybe your shoulders or your core strength. There are a lot of different directions that we can go in regards to specific needs. So on the bottom of the sheet, we will send you home with 3 corrective exercises or pieces of homework, things that you can do in like 10 to 15 minutes. Think of this very much like if you went to a physical therapist for an ankle issue. They might have you do some basic stretching for dorsiflexion. They might have you do some stability work or some different strength exercises. We're looking at things very much from a corrective exercise piece as well. So we'll give you homework based on the things we've seen. Use that as stuff you can do for warm-ups, for cool-downs. We'll notate your assessment, and then we'll revisit the things that we need to come back to in future sessions. And then last but not least, we will set you up for your first actual training session. Usually this process is done over the course of 2 60-minute sessions, so we have plenty of time to dive in and be able to see what you need and get you going in the right direction. After this, you'll get into your small group, your semi-private or your one-on-one training sessions, seeing us typically 2 to 4 days a week, starting to stack some progress and then really get after it. If you have any questions on how to go through this process, or if you are interested in working with us at Evexia, feel free to comment below or find us at evexiakc.com.